Hello everyone, welcome to my deck profile on the Purple Red Luffy from the Free Captains. I think this is a very phenomenal leader. I think this is a very strong leader, staying at 6k, but only free life. But I think free life is more than enough for this leader sometimes, right? But yeah, so first off, let's go over what he does. So activate main, once per turn. If you have 0 Don or 8 Don or more, just get a Don from your Don deck and set it to active. This comes up a lot in the late game. There's a lot of times where you're minusing just 1 Don away, but because you're sat at that 8 Don overall, you just get it back. And you get it back as active too, so this can help you use your 1-cost counters, or even do other 1-cost effects, or even just kind of slap it on the Luffy or another character and swing for that extra 1. So again, I think that makes it really, really good, really versatile unit, character for like what the deck wants to do, right? We'll be playing a lot more into the 6k as well, so just trying to boost him up, keep him at a certain attack power, so it makes it really hard for the opponent to kind of swing into him, hence why he's got such low life. Being at 6k already gives him an advantage against other leaders other than Whitebeard, just because that 1 Don, that 1k can make all the difference in certain matchups, or even just in the late game, in those final moments, that like last push to like taking the game. But yeah, we'll get right into it. Okay, so first up, we have our first 2k counters of the deck. Run these at 4, absolutely. Otamas are just kind of red staples. You see these all the time just because 2k counter is just that useful, and then the on-play does come up sometimes. We do run the 1 Edward Newgate in the deck, so there may be times where you get the chance to kind of drop one of these, minus that 2k away from something, and then you can kind of commit that onto Edward and just swing with him, right? So then you can just kind of KO something with like 3k or less, making it really useful in that late game too, both offensively and defensively. You probably are mostly holding onto it though for those defensive plays, just because the 2k is valuable. It comes up a lot. It's one of the ways to keep you alive, seeing as though your leader's at free life. But other than that, just really solid choice. Next up is the Jinbei. Kind of not as good as the Otamas, given the fact that they have the one attacking. This kind of, it's not really a desperate thing, it's just more so the fact of like lower costs are starting to be really easy to remove, so committing the 2 to play this and then hoping you can like have it survive so you can get that one attacking. You still have to commit the Don if you want to even like lower something by 2k, but you can still do the same thing. You could like swing with this, lower it by 2k, and then again the Edward Newgate could like come in and like clean something up for that. But most of the time, again, you're just using this for the 2k. It's just kind of valuable for that reason. When you can consider, when the Nami is unrestricted, you could use Nami to actually search this, seeing that it is a Straw Hat crew, so it'd be very valuable as because you do run like a good few like Straw Hats here and now, or you can rather, right? This one doesn't in particular, but the options are there. It's stuff you can consider, it's stuff you can think about for the deck, but mostly we just hold on to these as just 2k counters. Okay, next up are the Law Blocker. So again, it's 4-cost 5k, it's just a nice blocker. I feel that's where like a lot of the good blockers kind of sit at right now in the game. It's got the 1k counter, which does come up. It's really nice to have, given that you're at 6k. Sometimes a lot of leaders' sweet spots is like hitting for 7k, so it makes it really easy to kind of just only commit one of these and then be gone. A lot of the other cards kind of have that same positive, but you mostly want to try and play these if you can. Again, it's just really good, just being like a lowish commitment blocker. It's nice to just put down, know you have that as like a nice safety net to defend your Luffy. But really, we also like the on play, which is -1 Don. And then if your opponent has 7 or more cards in hand, you can just get rid of 2 of them. You obviously can't choose which 2 you want to get rid of, else this would be beyond busted. You'd run this everywhere all the time as much as you could. But still being able to get rid of 2, the possibilities of what you can hit right is just what makes this really good. In hindsight though, it kind of like, it's a necessity. I still feel like you want these. I still feel like you run them with 4, or like around that number. And again, they're still blockers. They're still useful. But I still like it doesn't come up as much as you'd want it to, right? Like, I feel like because a lot of people understand what purple's going to be about, a lot of people are going to be playing around the fact that they don't want 7 or more in hand. A lot of the times they'll try and sit at 6. They'll try and sit around that 5 mark, right? Like the Rob Lucci's and stuff, for example, kind of want to sit at those lower hand costs because they're mostly committing it away so that they can kind of swing more, especially with the leader. Right, in the mirror match, it can be kind of like a hit or miss because like they'll either just not have too much because they're defending a lot, right, or they'll either card draw a load because of the certain cards they're playing, like the Queens or the Guild Tesseros, depending on what they go for. So you can kind of like hold on to it for things like that. If you know they're trying to get the good card drawing, you can kind of hold on to it, punish them for card drawing, and then yeah, it's just a nice blocker on the field after that. Or it can even be like a 5k body in case you need to swing with it. Not that you'd ever really want to, but the option is there, which is better than nothing, right? So. Alright, next one. This one's going to be a very quick one. It's Queen. We all know why we run Queen. Queen is just really good. It's just a good 5 cost, 6k blocker. But then on play, you can just -1 Don, draw 2, trash 1. Really good way of kind of filtering out the hand. Really good way of just drawing, again, just 2 additional cards, which is just really nice to see. It's even got the 1k counter as well. So if you feel like you have too many of these, you can like sack one off and be good with it. Then, you know, the option's there. It's really nice. There's not much more else to say on this. It's just a really good card. It's a staple every time. Just, yeah, run it for. Next up, the meat and bones, essentially, of the deck. The Estes Captain Kid. You run this at 4. I do not care. Why? Like, not that anyone would contest it, right? Like, you do want to run these. You want to see these all the time. Or any time that you can. Like a good starting hand, whether it's starting first or starting second, is like your ramp into, and then like this, at least one of these. There's even been 1 or 2 games where like I've started a hand out or mulliganed into just 2 of these kids in hand, but then some defensive options, right? And I've won those games because like it's only like one or two turns away with ramp that you'll see this, and then you play this, your leader's now at 7k, which is just really difficult sometimes for the leaders enemies to deal with, because that's a lot of Don commitment, right? To try and get stuff to swing into a leader for life. And then, you know, if you have 2 of these, you play one and then you have the on play for the other, because the on play when attacking is insane for this. It's just -1 Don and then give your leader 1k for the rest of until the start of your next turn, rather, not even the rest of. So, like, again, playing one and then just playing another, you've got 2 8Ks on the board. That's just like, you know, hard to deal with enough as it is half the time. But then you've also got the leader that's now like 7 or 8k just like to deal with too. And that pretty much closes games out a lot by itself. A lot of times there's just going to be enemies that don't know what to do about this. In the matchup, in the mirror match, you kind of have it's who can get to Captain Kid first, right? Like you want to hit this first, you want to get to this first. There have been times where, like, you know, even if they get to it first, you can still drop this, and so long as you can either drop something really good defensively or really good offensively afterwards, you can turn it around, because just what he does is phenomenal. The only thing that hurts is it doesn't have a 1k counter, which is to be expected with a lot of these bigger cards. This is where sometimes you might see the weakness of the deck because of what gets run with it. But no, I think there's more positives than negatives here for definite. This is kind of a staple of just even purple in general, really, right? Like, I feel like a lot of purple decks want to just run this. And the Luffy is definitely no exception to that. Alright. You know, Kid 2.0, really. You can only run another one, which is a shame, but like a necessary shame, right? But we have Edward Newgate. So on play, up to one of your leader cards, just gain 2k power until the start of your next turn. So without minusing on the Don, but only for just on play. Sadly, no attacking here. It's doing what the Kid's doing, just a little bit better. So for 1 turn only, you're just getting a better like defensive and offensive play. You're putting your leader at least 8k. If you already have a Kid on board, then 9k, which is phenomenal. It's amazing, like hard to deal with. that's a lot of Don commitment for 5k leaders or anything around that to kind of deal with or like swing into. And it makes it very easy for you to defend with the amount of 2Ks and blockers and even some of the counters that you run in the deck, right? So yeah, dropping this on after a kid or even dropping this by yourself, it's a game changer a lot of the time. It like if the kids aren't doing it for you in the game, this just will. Dropping this just, it does make it really difficult for them to respond, because it is also just going to be a 10k coming at them next time. And yeah, of course, we talked about this with the Otamas. You can drop an Otama, you can minus 2k from something. If you can get something down to 3k power or less, or if they've dropped like really low commitment blockers, you can just slap 2 Don on this, and it's going to be a 12k that's going to just immediately get rid of something, but then just swing at life. And they kind of can't really do much else with that apart from try to contest that or have a blocker, if you haven't already removed it somehow. So yeah, just kind of a must-have in the deck as well. Really just helps with what the deck's trying to do. Makes your leader insane sometimes. There's been times where I've had like my leader even sit at like near a 10k for a turn because of another card that goes along with the kids as well. That just makes it really hard for opponents to deal with. Next up, another really high-cost character to the deck. I feel like this is one of those decks though that can get away with this because it wants to hit that late game, so you kind of defend early. So then you can kind of start dropping these things turn after turn after turn to really just like give some pressure to your opponent. But yeah, we have the 10 cost Luffy from the free captain's deck, who for 11k also has rush, and once per turn, if your opponent just activates a blocker, just KO character of 8k or less. And this is insane because the once per turn does not have to be triggered by this attacking, right? So there's been a few times where I have just 10 Dom, I don't really have a lot else I can really drop. So I'll just drop one of these, and the moment I've dropped it, that's it. It makes it a bit more difficult for how the opponent needs to defend, because if I swing with something else prompting blocker defense, I can still just pop with this. Even if I've already swung with this, if I just swing with something else for game, I can still just like pop with this Luffy. Which just like it basically, you drop it and you're either just taking a life guaranteed because there's no way they want something popped on their board, or you're going to just pop something regardless. You're going to get rid of a blocker, making it harder for them to defend. In yellow, you're popping stuff like the Katakuri and things of that nature, so it can again alleviate some pressure off of you depending on how they defend. But other than that, it's just a good way to close out the game. Yes, once again, it does not have the 1k counter, so if you see this too much in hand, it can be a bit hard to defend with. But much like these cards without the 1k counters, there are ways to kind of alleviate them and fix your hand and get rid of them if you need to. Again, the Queen, and one or two other cards that are coming up. But other than that, I think this is just a good card. I do like it over the Shanks. Mainly just because I like the once per turn just way more than Shanks is when attacking, even if it's just one extra to get out. I feel like in a ramping deck this is fine. This isn't really a negative because you're ramping to 10 just fine. Yes, you don't have that extra Don to kind of commit to something afterwards, but I kind of feel like a lot of the times that's not as necessary. Would be nice, but doesn't work out as well as you'd think. Okay, next up we're going to get into the package that you run with this deck. There's a few ways you can kind of build this deck, though they are kind of all going for the same thing. I like this one the most so far because it seemed to me the most consistent without, to put it bluntly, annoying me per se. But we'll get a bit more into that. But first off, we are running Film. So we're starting off with the Bunifestas. I think a lot of people already have an idea what these are about. These are just on play, search up the top 5 cards in your deck, and just take a film. So this can be the Utas, Gil Tesseros, the Ainz for the ramp, which is pretty much the thing you always want to take in 9 times out of 10. So yeah, really good just searching, good for just kind of filtering out the deck a bit. It can kind of suck if you do hit some other cards you think you'd want to see, like Kid and things of that nature. But in the early game, where that's the only reason why you're playing this, is just because you want to search for that ramp. But other than that, it's also just another 2k option. It's phenomenal that the searcher has the 2k. It kind of sucks because sometimes you feel like you have to play this to start getting like a hold of some cards, but at least the rest of them don't end up dead in hand. They have like a reason to kind of keep the leader alive, right? So, okay. Next next up is the Ein. So again, this is the card you're probably searching for with the Buena Festa, unless you, specific situations apply. Just a 4-drop, 5k. When you play this, just add Arrested Don. It sucks that it isn't an active, but it would just be really phenomenal if it was an active Don. Being able to use like that extra counter or something like that on a turn, or committing it to the already 6k leader, would make it kind of real tough. So sadly, it's not without its faults. Other than that, it doesn't have the wonky counter. So again, it kind of sucks when you see this in hand after you've done your ramp or after you've hit late game, because you could argue that you could drop it. It's just a 5k on the field, which could contest a good few leaders. But I feel like a lot of the time they either have an easy way of dealing with this or don't really care too much. So other than that, it ends up being a dead card. But again, like a few of the others, there's just ways of filtering it out. I still feel like it's one of the most consistent though, because it's ramp that can be searched, which I think in the early game can matter if your first hand didn't work out or if your mulligans didn't work out. But this was the card I was talking about, where like if you start your hand out and you see this in like a kid or even maybe 2 kids depending, probably not because you need some stuff to defend you, right? Then you'd probably take it. You just take it because you ramp. Like going second, obviously you skip your first turn, that's whatever, but then second turn you drop this, and then third turn you can just kid immediately. Going first, not as great. If you can hit some of the ramp stuff that we have from life, then it can make this a bit better as well, because then you could drop this too, and it can kind of help with some of that ramp alleviate, like it can kind of help with some of that aggression in the late game, right? Like being able to get to your biggest stuff first to be able to drop it and just kind of win the game. But we still want to run this at full regardless, just because we want that consistency. I don't know if it would work out trying to run this at 3 just so you have one less dead card in hand. It depends on what you'd probably replace it with, right? So we just keep it just for the sake of Buena Festa, film in general, and just ramping. So, okay, next up is Guild Tessero. This is a card I kind of messing with the numbers with. I think I'd probably don't mind it at 2. I think at 3 though it's also just kind of fine. So if we don't know what Guild Tessero does, it's just a 5 cost 6k when attacking, -2 done, and you can just draw 2 cards. There's no negative after that because you're already having to get rid of 2 done anyway. It can be a hit or miss because obviously you can end up drawing a lot of cards that may not actually save you or defend you. But it's still card draw, right? It's still like you're seeing cards that you probably want to see. Later on, when you have enough Don to commit, you can kind of swing this, get some defensive options out, and either play something still decently big because you've only -2 Don away, or just play some blockers and stuff like that. You can that also still keeps you in range with the Luffy, so you can -2 Don away if you need to. And then still totally just get 1 back as active. So really, you can sometimes make this just -1 Don to draw 2, which to me is amazing. But yeah, there are 1 or 2 times where you can probably get a bit too trigger happy with this, and this in conjunction with some other cards that you play, you end up minusing a bit more Don than you probably realise. So just, when you play this, and most of the time you shouldn't have too much struggle with it, but just make sure you know how much Don you're totally getting rid of, ready for your neck, because you want to focus on those big plays more than anything else. But it's still a decent card being a 6k, so it can definitely just threaten a lot of 5ks, and it can still contest the Luffy in the mirror match, unless they've of course pumped themselves up. But it's less Don commitment too, for that case as well. So again, just overall a decent card. I can probably run this around 2. It's just figuring out something that I'd want over this 3rd one. But I don't mind keeping it at 3 either. I think it's completely fine either way. It's just up to personal preference at that point on how you want to optimize the deck. Okay, and these are our final blockers of the deck. The Utas, I feel like they're the other just good staple of purple. They're just, again, another 4 cost 5k like the Law, searchable by the Buena Festa, and then just this time instead of on play, just has a nice on block -1 Don, and then you can rest a character of 5k or less. So you probably, again, in the mirror match, you probably aren't resting too many of the big things that Luffy's playing, so that can be a bit of a struggle, but you can rest their blockers, which can kind of allow you to have some aggressive plays your next turn, can maybe even help you win 1 or 2 games, depending if they're not committing too many blockers to the board. But other than that, it's just a decent defensive play. There's nothing to argue about it. Again, it's got the 1k counter like the Lords and the Queens, so it's just another good blocker option. We don't run the wires in this at all. You could, because we are mostly committing ourselves to the film, and then the rest is just built around defensive plays. But depending on how you like your Uta or your Laws, you can probably mess with some numbers, add some wires in, and all these minus like Don effects, right? You can totally have like the wire in play, have this in play or something, then -1 Don, and then because you did that, you trigger the wire to draw a card, trash a card. So it can make for some more like card drawing synergies, but I feel like with the Guild Tesseros and the Queens, that's not needed too much else. So this is mainly just a good defensive play regardless. Yeah, so not really much else to explain why we keep that. Alright, and on to more big cards of the deck. Again, this deck runs a lot of big characters. So, but I feel like it can get away with it because it has a lot of defensive plays to get to that late game and start dropping big thing after big thing after big thing. And I think this really helps playing into what the deck wants to do because it's basically like the kit, but it's just an on-play and no one attacking. So -2 Don, and then all of your characters and your leader get 1k until the start of your next turn. So it's really good to drop this like after the kid, or drop this after something else, even something defensive, because then it can mean your queens are like 7k for a turn, right? And that's huge. Or it can mean that your kids are like 9k, which is a really good, like, you know, just a nice sweet spot for bigger like character cards to swing. Or it just means your Luffy's like a 7k if you decide to play this instead of a kid. You probably still want to play the kids instead, but there's been plenty of times where like if I don't have a second kid, or there are times where I'll just play the first kid, play this, and then maybe play a second kid, because in a weird way, because these aren't the kids, because obviously it doesn't have the win attacking, I don't mind it if these, for example, get like red rocked, and then that kind of baits out the fact that, oh, I can just play another kid. And then I don't have to worry about like that other kid disappearing anytime soon. But again, this is also searchable by the Buena Festa. In saying that, there's a lot of things in the film that you probably don't want to just like hit with the Buena Festa, just because again, you're mainly using it to search for a ramp, and then after that, you're probably just holding on to it as the 2k option. But this is still really good. That's still really good to run that. This is probably one of the first things, I think, big character-wise, that might get replaced when stuff like set 5 hits. It depends on how you feel about it, really. I do like this card. I just think that because we have the kids and the Whitebeard, it can be the first thing to go, and it shouldn't really hit the deck too much. But I'll have to kind of confirm that, obviously, when set 5 hits. We've done some testing and kind of come back with that. So, okay, final big thing for the deck. Douglas Bullet. So the funny story about Douglas Bullet is I had to be kind of convinced to run him, because before I was just running one more of the Luffy, and then I think I was just running something defensive over it too. I couldn't exactly remember. But I was kind of told, like, hey, you should just totally try the Douglas Bullet because it's just really good for the deck. And I'm like, I don't believe you, but I'm going to try it anyway. And lo and behold, it's not as amazing as I first believed, but it's still really good. So what Douglas does here, it's an 8 cost 10k. On activate main, you -4 Don, and then you can rest 2 characters of 6 cost or less. This also gains double attack. How I wish it was Rush, but you know, Rush at the time when this film in particular was around, Rush was kind of just Red's thing, right? So this got double attack, which I still think can be really good. Like at the end of the day, you know, like 10k double attack is nothing to snuff at. Like, do you know what I mean? I feel like that can still be really threatening, but a lot of the times, you're probably only playing Douglas just to kind of close out a game, not because he himself will swing, but you can, you obviously minus that 4 Don, and you can rest their blockers, for example, because again, like a lot of blockers at the moment are sitting at that 4 cost, 5 cost area, where, you know, they're not avoiding this Douglas, you know? Again, your opponent can't really interact with Douglas when you do this activate main. They kind of have to accept that things are going to get rested, so you can either choose to kind of swing at those things and get rid of them to kind of, like, you know, clear board, or you can just swing for game. There's been a good few times where, like, on my turn, like where I have 8 Don or so, I can just kind of drop this, and then they're kind of like, you know, oh shit, well, Douglas is here now. I kind of have to like do something about that. Like, you know, if you're not a blue player, you're not red rocking it, you're not getting rid of it that easily. You know, you can't like catter this or things of that nature. You kind of have to just accept that it's here, unless you are, you know, you are that blue player that can red rock this, that can get rid of it that way. But yeah, so like I'll drop this, and then next turn I'll drop like the 10 cost Luffy, and then I can just kind of choose to like just -4 Don, doesn't have to be active Don, and then just rest some stuff and then swing with the Luffy regardless, or anything like that. It just kind of is a very quick, like, you know, just out of nowhere, win the game kind of card. The downfalls obviously come from the fact of, you know, if you minus so much Don away, you kind of have to make sure you're ready to actually finish that game there and then, because if your opponent can actually defend that, then that's 4 Don you got rid of, you're out of that Luffy range, and it can kind of be difficult to stabilize again. On top of that, no counters, so it's, you know, if it sits in your hand, it's going to probably sit there for a bit, unless you've, like, you know, luckily drawn into it, you've seen it when you want to see it, so you drop it when you want to drop it. But yeah, I still think it's a good card. At the end of the day, if you drop it on board, it's still like a 10k that they have to deal with. I feel like once people stop using the whole film with the Luffy and maybe consider some other options, this is still a good tech card that even if you don't have film search in it, you can still keep like 1 or 2 of these around, just because like that resting power is so good. It's just so good by itself, just so generic, so just really easy to deal with current blockers. Not a lot of stuff really gets around that without being higher than a 6 cost, right? So I think this is just still a really good card that you absolutely just run in the deck, like no matter what. At least 1 of, maybe 2 of. I run the 2 because I don't mind seeing it a little bit more, because you're ramping, you're getting to that 8 cost like way quicker than you think. So you'd be ready to drop 1 of these, like probably. You know, if you don't see the kids, like this isn't a bad thing to drop, but like probably after the kids and things of that nature. So. Okay, so now we're going to get into the counters of the deck. We're going to finally get to explain just some cards that just work really well with what the deck wants to do. And on top of that, 1 or 2 more options for both ramping and kind of filtering out your hand for some like extra defensive plays. But first and foremost, Radical Beam. This just works so well with the deck. I wish I could have more of these, but alas, restricted to 1. So, for those that do not know, you can essentially add 2k power for a battle to a leader or even a character, but then if you're at 2 life or less, you gain an additional 2k. So now with the Luffy being at 3, you pretty much always take that first life when getting hit. It's kind of like most of the time it's okay, you know, you can probably hit something decently well, like some of the counters coming up that also have additional effects, or just something you might want to see pretty early. So then you're at 2, and then that's it. You're just in Radical Beam range for the rest of the game, because it's just really easy to kind of hold on to this and save it for when those big swings happen, and it can be such a lifesaver. Like it can really change things sometimes. The shame being is that because it's at 1, you won't see it all that much. So like when you do see it, it's kind of a blessing in disguise, right? And again, because the Luffy's kind of like extra, being able to get 1 active Don back from like certain minus Don effects, if you keep around that like 8-9 Don range, you can really help get a Don back to like keep this as a defensive option, making this kind of always be online and always ready to defend an already hard to hit leader sometimes, right? So I think this is valuable. I think this is pretty much just always needed in red and things of that nature. So yeah, we run the 1. Okay, so we're now going to be getting to the card that can kind of help with both the ramping and both kind of like filtering out your hand. There is another one that kind of help with the ramping, but for now this is one of the options we have too, and this is Gum Gum Jet Gatling. So first off, 0 cost, so not much Don commitment at all. You can kind of go do whatever you want with your Don for a turn, and then if you've got this in hand along with something you don't mind getting rid of, like the Eins if you ramp too much already, or just some other cards that like you kind of don't mind getting rid of in that early game because you know you can't really play them for a while, you can just get like a nice 3k for a battle. Like again, already making like a really hard leader to swing into sometimes just even harder. And then on top of that, I like this over Bad Manners Kit Course option because the trigger is just add one active Don. So again, that first life that you're probably going to be taking just because, may as well see what it is, may as well stay in Radical Beam range, you can potentially just ramp from this. And there has been a few times where, because I'm running this at 3, you can run this at 4 too. You see it, you ramp, and then that's it. You're ready to just go on your turn. There might be times where you even ramp into an unexpected kid turn. Ready to just kind of just pump up your leader and just kind of swing big. So I think it's a very valuable card. I think the Bad Manners Kit Course does have some value to it as well, but I think this is overall just better for the deck. So last but not least is a card that I really do like in the deck. I think Luffy can get away with it better than other purple leaders. That doesn't make it a terrible card for other leaders per se. I just think personally, for what the deck is about doing, it can save you sometimes, and that is weakness is an unforgivable sin. So for 1 cost, -1 Don, so it can be that same Don, you can just gain 1k for the rest of the turn, right? So a character or leader, and that's really good sometimes, because yes, it's not Blast Breath where it's putting you at 4k for a battle, but at the very least, there's a lot of times where, if your opponent just isn't too aware with the Don committal, or is already committed all over the place, or is trying to just barely get by, because sometimes you might have your leader just super pumped up from the kids or the Whitebeard or the Uta, just dropping this and just gaining that extra 1k, it just keeps you out of that range. It can keep you safe. It's for the rest of the turn. They kind of have to. There's been times where I've absolutely played one of these, even 2 of these, because then that, you think about it, that's 2k for the rest of the turn, right? That your leader gets to hold on to. That, they kind of have to give up on any aggressive play they tried having. And then on top of that, over Blast Breath, it has the trigger, so you just get 1 active Don. So again, the Gum Gum Jeg outline, it's just really nice to try and take that first life, see if it's one of these because you're running it at 4, and if it is, you ramped. There you go, that's it. I like it over stuff like the Lead Performer and that, because yes, whilst it might not be drawing you a card, it's not a card where if it's not in life, it's just this 4 cost in hand, where in the late game it's just difficult to ramp. It's well, not difficult to ramp, more so just you've already ramped, you're already at that stage, you probably don't want to drop a card for 4 like that. But this is a nice 1 cost to kind of defend yourself with. I think it works better with the Luffy than it does any other deck. There have been times though where, in saying that, I've had this in hand and I do wish it was a Blast Breath, just because those really big characters that can swing at you from say Big Mom in yellow, or when they just when your opponent does just commit a lot of Don to one character ready for a big swing. But that's not to say that there haven't been times where this has saved me too, even with just the 1k, because it's for the turn, or just when seeing the Don ramp, because then it means I don't just have to rely on the Iron all the time, or the Buena Festa to even search for the ramp, right? I have 2 other ways of being able to search, giving me just a total of at least 10, 11 cards that can kind of ramp me up, depending, obviously, a lot of them I have to see in life to do that, which isn't the best all the time, given that I'm only at 3 life, but still, seeing that is really nice regardless. It's kind of up to you if you want to change these out to Blast Breaths. I almost considered doing a thing where I just do 2/2 and see if that works for me. But I think it's very much just up to you on your style of play. I feel like I prefer these overall more, so I'm probably going to keep these in, but I will try the Blast Breaths and see what works out better. That was my red purple Luffy deck. I feel like this one's done me justice a lot recently. There was my most recent games I had where it was a lot of the Luffy matchups, right? The mirror matches. So a lot of the time it was just kind of about who could get to the Estes Captain Kid first. And then it's kind of just trying to finish those kind of games, right? Because with our leaders just pumping up the power so much, it's just making even for us swinging into each other really difficult to do so, right? Because if you can't maintain the kids on board, or ways to defend yourself, then even in that mirror it becomes a struggle. I feel just a quick briefing into what the deck is probably going to struggle against. I feel like it can struggle against blue really quickly because in this late game you're committing so much to playing these high costs and then like nothing else apart from the leader swing. That's it. They can your opponent can kind of commit just a little bit less, like the red rocks in blue, to kind of just get rid of them, right? And I know they won't have red rocks forever. They're not always going to like have them all the time. It's not always going to be that consistent, but it's like the right time and right place, right? Where they can kind of do that, still set up a bit of a board, maybe even defend, or maybe even just get like really aggressive with you. Which being at that free life, sometimes you do notice that it can be really hard to like fight back if they're ready for what you're dropping, right? And then of course I feel like the big one to talk about is it has an uphill battle against the Katakuri. I feel like Katakuri has an easier time against this deck. Both decks can still like I feel like they can both. It's quite a decently close matchup. Either deck can still win. It's just the Luffy kind of has to jump over a few extra hurdles to really get an advantage over the Katakuri. Considering the Katakuri has more life to go through, which also means more triggers to go through, and the Katakuri has a lot of ways of not only just healing life, but just kind of making you have to choose between either getting rid of your own or like just giving them one. So like 9 times out of 10, you'd probably end up like giving the Katakuris one, just because you can't go risking taking that extra life, because 9 times out of 10 they're also dropping a big body on the board whilst doing that, which just really can make it an uphill battle if you haven't got anything ready to defend yourself, or you're not pumping your attack power via the kids or the Whitebeard. Though that's kind of from what I've experienced so far. I've not really had too many other matchups to really say. I kind of feel like, Big Mom Yellow in particular, and then just blue in general, because a lot of the staples of blue can kind of deal with the Luffy. And then of course the mirror match is just all about getting to that late game first, right? But other than that, I feel like it's a really fun leader. It's a really phenomenal deck. And I feel like it's only going to get better in set 5. Only so many cards are needed for it, but I feel like there's like a lot more that you can do, especially if you branch out from the film stuff, right? So yeah, that's pretty much been everything for this deck profile. Stay tuned for when I probably update this when set 5 hits, or when I just decide to throw up another deck or any other leaders I'm particularly fond of in this set or in this format, and go from there. Thanks for watching.